One of the major causes of the Civil War was the fact that black people kept running away, and they would run away into states where they would be technically considered free because slavery had been abolished in those states. And so even though they had lawful rights that should have protected them, the federal government's willingness to trump those rights, and I'm using that word intentionally, one, because the federal government can supersede the desires and the legal limitations of the state government. And so welcome back to the Lurie Daniel Favors Show. I am Lurie Daniel Favors, and I'm seeing breaking news that shots were just fired into Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign office in Tempe, Florida. Fortunately, no one was hurt. This is the second time that there have been gunshots at this office. So we need to make sure we say a prayer, and y'all need to check your voter registration. Vote early, vote early, vote early, vote early. But this idea that black people who, under the auspices of state law, were going to be freed once they made it to that land, that free state border out of a slave state from which they had been held, that law, those rights that they had, did not matter once a white supremacist federal government said, you know what, damn your state rights. We are going to take any black person that we determine to be a former enslaved person, and we're going to send them back into enslavement. There was a whole movie about this. Samuel Northup did the story of 12 Years a Slave. There was a whole film about people who were not actually enslaved, who had never been enslaved, but who, because white people who were racist and had the power of guns and the government, decided that it didn't matter if you were not actually enslaved, you were going to be enslaved if they said so. That was how the fugitive slave laws happened. What was also interesting about the fugitive slave laws is that white people were mandated to cooperate. If you didn't want to cooperate, that's fine. But as he talks about there were people who were themselves arrested and tortured for not helping to return enslaved Africans and instead helping them to be freed. That's one piece of information that I wanted to set as sort of the umbrella over this conversation that we're going to have briefly just now. Mark Elias, who is a renowned election lawyer who has won just about every case he has filed to protect our democracy when it comes to minimizing the Republicans' abilities to engage in voting rights suppression, he is warning right now about the fact that the Republicans are now coming to block the votes of the military. Why does Mark Elias say this? Well, Mark Elias, election lawyer, white man, he said the following: Donald Trump is preparing to attack the voting rights of members of the U.S. military and other U.S. citizens who are living abroad. And he's quote tweeting Donald Trump, who says the Democrats are talking about how they're working so hard to get millions of votes from Americans living overseas. Actually, they're getting ready to cheat. And he goes into this long diatribe on his fake social media platform, Truth Social, where he's talking about preventing the votes of military members who have every legal right to vote, preventing their votes from being counted. What does this have to do with fugitive slave laws? I'm going somewhere. Just follow me for just a second. Robert Reich, who is a Berkeley professor, he's the former Secretary of Labor. He has also sounded the alarm about the ways in which Donald Trump and the Republicans are planning to take over local law enforcement policies and practices. And Robert Reich said that it should be bigger news that Donald Trump has pledged to have federal forces invade nearly every major American city to take over law enforcement. Now, why would he say that? Well, he said that because Donald Trump has said, today I am announcing a new plan to end all sanctuary cities in North Carolina and across the country. As soon as I take office, we will immediately surge federal law enforcement to every city that is failing to turn over criminal aliens. I will ask Congress to pass a law outlawing sanctuary cities nationwide, and we will bring down the full weight of the federal government on any jurisdiction that refuses to cooperate with ICE and Border Patrol. So Donald Trump has already said he wants to give complete complete immunity, not even qualified, just complete immunity to the police force. He is announcing his plan that under Trump's Project 2025, they will come to every local jurisdiction that they determine to be problematic and take over the law enforcement functions. And when you combine that with Mark Elias sounding the alarm about the Republicans trying to now steal the votes from military members who have the right to vote, and then you look at the fugitive slave law, it all comes together for me in this really weird soup that's really sort of in a bowl of mass deportation. Now, mass deportation is something that a lot of people think it's going to apply only to immigrants. And I think that's fine if you think that, like that, if you think that that's only going to apply to immigrants, then what I'm about to say probably doesn't interest you. And you don't have to worry about it. But when we're talking about the efforts to do this sort of thing, one of the things we have to be mindful of is the history here, because this effort to essentially say that they're going to cancel the votes of people who they know have the right to vote, that they're going to invade our local police departments, and that they are going to do what they can to ensure that they round up everyone who they deem suspicious and deport them. By my understanding of history, that also includes Black Americans. It also includes Black Americans. Now, I posted this on Twitter and I said, Black Americans, this means us too. Like, to me, that was completely non-confrontational. It was non-controversial. Black Americans are included in this group. When people like Donald Trump say they're going to invade our police system and that they are going to take over the police functions and that they're going to round people up, that also includes Black Americans. Now, unbeknownst to me, because I don't play on Twitter that much. Unbeknownst to me, apparently, by using the phrase Black Americans, I sent out a signal to the alphabet gang. So now there's a tweet that I put out yesterday. I muted the tweet shortly after I put it out, so I did not realize there was all this activity around it. But it's like got 700 comments underneath it. As I said, Black Americans, this means us too. Now, first of all, some of them took issue because they don't technically think I'm a Black American because my mom's Jamaican. I cared not one twat what they think about that. But so I was like, why is this tweet getting so much traction? This is not controversial. Do we not know that the fugitive slave laws have demonstrated the Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott? Do we not realize that we have a history in this country where white people will give us rights and then snatch them back anytime they feel like it? Do we honestly think that because you can trace your lineage back generations that you're not going to be wrapped up, tied up, and tangled up in this? And like, do we not also have examples of people, Black Americans, who ain't got no connection to any other country but this one, being arrested and held in detention? Yes, we do, actually. We actually do have that. Washington Post did an entire article describing the case of this one brother who he himself was arrested. He was held for weeks in detention because they assumed he was from Jamaica. He was telling them, I ain't never been to Jamaica. He said, I went to Jamaica one time on a cruise. I'm multi-generation, born in Philadelphia, ain't got nothing to do with no other country. And yet he was held for weeks before finally someone decided to listen to him and look at his birth certificate. So I did not know this was going to be a controversial thing, but it is a controversial thing because, and one of the reasons it's controversial is because I then found out one of the leaders of the alphabet gang, whose name rhymes with Narik Tahid, do with that what you will. He tweeted it. I was like, oh, so you put out the SWAT signal, not the bat signal. You put out the SWAT signal. So now it all began to make sense. Okay, so, and this is what they do. This is why you can't feed the trolls. And I was very petty yesterday. LJ Williams told me not to be petty and feed the trolls. I fed some trolls, and so this is not what's happening. But this idea of mass deportation only being limited to people who cannot prove they are American citizens is foolish. And I need us to be mindful of that because Donald Trump right now, according to The Guardian, is planning to unleash the largest mass deportation of undocumented migrants in history if he wins re-election. But what we know from every single time America has engaged in some sort of mass deportation is that Americans also end up getting deported. There was an entire operation called Operation insert slur of Mexican people. It starts with wet and it ends with another word, but there was an entire operation called that name where they not only rounded up people who were undocumented, but they sent home they excommunicated and deported tens of thousands of American citizens as well. And so there is this nativist thread that is driving through our discourse in a way, and it's usually just online, but I'm starting to see it even in real life when we're hearing from people in our communities talking about immigrants and migrants as if you are safe, as if you are not also going to get caught up in these sorts of efforts. And so when we think about the fugitive slave laws, when we think about the fact that in the past, when America has done mass expulsions of people, whether it's the indigenous people who they literally had the initial right to be on this land and they were wholesale removed from it. And you've got people right now arguing amongst themselves in my mentions, because again, the thread, I muted it, so I'm not even paying attention to it. But you have people who are now to the tune of 700 some odd comments arguing amongst themselves about the fact that my lineage goes back 5 generations. Where they going to deport me to? Detroit? Baby, they will deport your ass to the detention center and leave you there and forgot you ever existed. I don't understand where this willingness to embrace an anti-historical perspective. And I heard Karen yesterday talking on her show about people who were perfectly willing to have this whole conversation about how you should wrap up immigrants and send them away. And I'm puzzled, because do you honestly think, even if you are anti-immigrant, that's your right to be. You ain't got to be, you can be as anti-immigrant as you want to. But do you honestly think that it's not going to include you?